The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi, everyone who's already joined us. We're going to get started in just a few minutes. I'm just going to give some other folks a chance to join in. So I know we had about 21 people sign up through the link that was sent out. But then in GoToWebinar, we don't have quite so many folks registered. So I just might need to give a little bit of time for everybody to get connected into the webinar itself before we get started. This is Jess Benedetto with MassCap. I'll do my official introductions shortly. And everybody is, just so you know, everybody is muted. So if you have any questions, you can use the chat box or the questions box if you're having any issues with access or sound or anything like that. And JC and Martha are with us. We have quite a bit to cover today, so we'll probably give until about 2:35, and then we'll just get started, and folks will have to catch up a little bit. Anybody's just joining, this is Jess Benedetto with MassCap. I am going to give people just a few more minutes, just another minute or so to join. We'll get started at about 2:35. Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. We probably will have a few more folks join us. Welcome, I'm Jess Benedetto. Welcome to the MassCap Training Center's webinar, Promising Practices to Encourage Savings at Tax Time. I'm MassCap's Training and Resource Manager. MassCap itself is a statewide association of Mass's 23 community action agencies. The MassCap Training Center offers training and resources to enhance the ability of each agency to serve its clients, develop staff and board, improve operations, expand capacity, and comply with funder requirements. So today I'm very pleased to welcome our presenter, J.C. Craig, who's president of J.C. Craig Consulting and has been consulting with the Community Action Network on VITA and financial capability programming best practices. So thank you, J.C., for being here today. Also joining us today is MassCap's own expert in asset development and financial capability programs and grants, who is Martha Rogers. So thanks again, Martha.
Thank you.
I'm just going to do some quick tech tips and housekeeping items before we get moving. So some tips for participating in the webinar. You should have been prompted to choose your audio option, choosing either your computer microphone and speakers or to switch to a phone call. So if you're using a phone, remember to enter the audio pin. If you're using a headset, you might have to click the drop-down menu under microphone and select internal mic. For best viewing of the webinar, you should expand your screen to full screen using the square box in the top right-hand corner of your window. You should see your GoToWebinar control panel located at the top right corner of your screen. All attendees are going to be muted during the webinar, so you should use the questions box or the chat box in your control panel if you have a question or comment. If the box is collapsed, you can expand it by clicking the arrow next to questions or chat. If you do have any questions, first try closing and relaunching, or any issues, try closing and relaunching the webinar, and if that doesn't work and you're still having trouble, you can go ahead and email me at jessbenedetto@masscap.org. So we're going to go ahead and get started, and I'm going to hand it over to JC. Thanks, JC.
Thank you, Jess. I'm J.C. Craig, and I have been working with you all for, I think this is the second year that you all have been a part of the Tax Time Savings Initiative. And we're here to get you talking about tax time savings and thinking about it. For this report, I've kind of put two previously delivered webinars together, and I'm going to go briskly through the first part and then slow down as we get into the second part, which will be kind of more the promising practices. But first of all, this is the disclaimer that the CFPB has for all its materials. And basically, it's to let you know that this is not legal guidance or advice from the CFPB. And that this is a part of a live discussion, so just having the slide deck is not going to be enough to give you the information that was shared. Anything where we reference third-party resources, so I know you all are using Save Your Refund this year. That should not be construed as like an endorsement for that third-party service. And then we are going to go through this quickly. We're going to talk about savings and tracking savings. And then we're going to get into the 12 promising practices, really highlight a couple, a quick overview of the tools, which hopefully you're already familiar with. Then we're going to have some time for questions. So this year, the CFPB released a report on the benefits of better measuring savings. And we also did a guide of ways people are tracking savings and doing that better. And this information really comes from those reports. And because I know this is a point of emphasis for MassCap, is to try to get better data, get more accurate data about savings, and be able to use that to improve your programs. I really wanted to go over this first as a part of this session. So why do we want to collect taxpayer information and information about savings activities? Well, it tells our story as an organization. Most importantly, you could tell your story to your local stakeholders and funders. So that data is what's going to help you get your word out, show the success you're having. It's something that can really help you say, yeah, am I getting the outcomes I want out of this savings at tax time? I think getting accurate data, that's going to drive a lot of this And it's something that can motivate staff and volunteers. So are we having success? Where aren't we not having success? What could be better? It really gets your staff and volunteers thinking about those issues and what could make the change. I think it's really important as you get into collecting data, collecting information about taxpayers. Why do you want that information? What information do you want? How are you going to use it? Just have some clarity in your mind. I know a lot of you are collecting this data because Martha wants it, and that's a good reason. But I think there's also, if you think about your local site and what your local organization wants to do, there's probably some ways you're going to want to use that data and frame it with your stakeholders. Last year, I just want to show this as an example, kind of where we're having trouble collecting savings information. If you look at last year's program, shoot, didn't mean to click that. If we look at 8888 and direct deposit, we got about 3% doing 8888 or the bonds. And then we got 70% of people using direct deposit. Somewhere in there's where the real number of savings is. I don't think it's as high as 70%, nor do I think it's as low as 3%. And we're just trying to get what's closer to that number. What's closer to our real story about our success on tax time savings. I think a lot of this also comes back to how do we think about savings? Savings is basically just money you're holding for the future. So that could be in anything. However, a lot of times we think about it as accumulated savings, assets, deposits in bank accounts, retirement accounts, homes, other tangible properties. It's not, people with lower incomes are less likely to save in these products. So it's a little bit harder to track them. You can't just say, how much do you have in the bank account now? And say, oh, that's your savings. And there's some evidence that there's some clear reasons people are choosing not to use traditional bank accounts. I think people just don't know what kind of fees they're going to get charged. They aren't expecting the overdraft fee or the low balance fee. Some of them may not trust banks. And there's some FDIC research that's really supporting this kind of we have to look at savings in new ways when we talk about our taxpayers, the kind of taxpayers we serve. Then I think there's the basic challenge of what we can collect. It's really easy to collect refund information. It just comes right out of TaxSlayer. It's really easy to track those bond purchases, and basically everything else is much harder to track. So as we thought about how to help you guys all better track information, we thought about two areas. One, just what do people actually do? And are they saving in a bank account? Are they doing direct deposit in some kind of savings vehicle? And then what are their intentions? I think what we find is both of those, tracking both is valuable. And I think it's also valuable for you as a program because you don't know what your stakeholders are going to whether your stakeholders are going to find some of the intention stuff, something they accept as a measure, right? Yeah, the taxpayer says they're going to save part of their refund in checking. So you're going to, how do you kind of prove they actually did that or saved it or for how long? These all get hard. What we did last year and why we think that some of this is really valuable to you is last year about 9 programs tracked, did people save in a savings vehicle, or so a savings account, an IRA, something like where you would put money for a long time savings? So they just put the whole refund in there. And could we say, if we track that in addition to 8888, what did that do to their savings rate? Well, what we found with those programs is that more than doubled the savings rate. So just by tracking that, we made a big difference in our knowledge of what people are saving. in addition, when we look at these activity issues, one of the questions is like, are people like kind of have reasonable expectations on what they're going to do with their refund? You know, research that we based a lot of the questions on that you will be using said, you know, when we ask them those questions, taxpayers kind of underestimate their ability to pay down debt and save. So, you know, they thought 66% thought they were going to pay down debt or save. And when we go back and check in 6 months later, we see there's 76% are doing it. I don't think that's something you're not necessarily going to be in contact with the taxpayer to check on their status, but it does give us some evidence that tracking these activities can work and give us some insights. So this next part, we have a guide. I will have a link for how to get to that guide, but Martha can get you the guide as well on, you know, how we track savings. The guide looks a little bit like this. We talk about what information to collect, approaches to collect the information, and ways to integrate it with the tax site. And we're really going to go over this a little bit and talk specific to using TaxSlayer. One, let's talk about the, you know, in the guide, we saw that there were basically 3 ways people are approaching taking data. User-defined fields and TaxSlayer, that's what you're using this year. I think most of you, perhaps someone's going to try to just decide, oh, I'm just going to collect it manually. I don't know if that works for you all. But we found these 3 ways. And we talk more about that in the guide. And we talk about disadvantages and advantages of the different ways of doing of collecting this data. So, you know, you might want to use a software product, or you might want to do it manually for different reasons. We go into those details in the guide. I'm not going to go into that here. I think everyone's kind of using TaxSlayer. And then we're going to talk about some of the limits of TaxSlayer, which is like you can't really make the questions whatever you want in TaxSlayer. You know, the tool itself defines what you can have its limits. And you're pretty much going to use the tax preparer to collect that information with TaxSlayer. That's the person in the best position. So it gives you, you know, put some limits on what you can do. On the other hand, it's really convenient. There's 2 places where you can collect information in TaxSlayer: custom fields, which are multiple choice questions, and there are the custom credits field, where you can enter a numeric amount from 0 to 999,999,999. The custom credits feature was created to track state and local tax credits that weren't automatically pulled into reports in TaxSlayer, so you could track those. But you could also we can also obviously use them to track other activities, such as how much someone put in their savings account. So those are handy features that we can use. And this year, we're also getting custom credits and custom fields and custom credits preloaded, because Martha's already signed up for doing that with Taxpayer Opportunity Network, and TaxSlayer should push those custom fields and questions into your systems at some point this year. So that should make it really easy. You can't really customize these fields once they're created, so each of those fields are set. But you still have several of those fields that you can use if you have other data you want to collect. And if you want to do that, I suggest like getting our guide. It'll help you kind of like walk through what you want to do. The other thing that's nice about TaxSlayer, every report uses the last name and the last four of the Social Security. And that's a way you can download the information into Excel spreadsheets and match up each report. So it's pretty simple. You just need to have a little experience with Excel, and you can kind of like look at your reports. You might be able to figure out like, oh, someone with a higher AGI is more likely to save than someone with a lower AGI. That kind of question. Is it the refund that really makes the difference? So you can work with your own data, see what your taxpayers are doing, and kind of look at demographics and different. Like incorporate information, collecting taxpayer information into your system. You know, and we talk about different roles and different points in the tax preparation where someone might assist. I think with TaxSlayer, we're mostly going to look at that, using the preparer to enter that information. You know, some of the challenges are people can be a little bit inconsistent about how they enter the data. You know, I think, and there's some ways people have worked around that. One of the things people have done has been to actually have the quality reviewer enter the data, just to get a little more consistency that way. I personally like to use my quality reviewers to review what's been entered. So I don't have them like review every field in the user-defined fields to see that the correct information was entered. But they might look at a few, make sure something was entered at all, because a lot of times you'll end up with the thing, the taxpayer didn't fill out the survey, so the preparer didn't know what to do or wasn't sure whether they should enter anything. So that can be an important way to ensure you get that data, using the reviewer to double check. And then checkout can also be a great place to double check. And I think it's also important to remember this is the last place where you can get your 7216 consent signed. So once that taxpayer has been given the signed copies of the tax return, that's the last time you can get consent to use or disclose their information from the tax return. So that is a great place to double check. It's a great way to, just like that last point, whether it's done by the preparer or the reviewer, or you have a third person that's handling checkout, it's really the last point to check things and make sure you've got the information you can do. And that was kind of an overview of data collection, how we used it, some suggestions about thinking about collecting it well. I know we're encouraging you to collect some data you haven't had in the past at MASCAP. I think it's going to benefit you. It's going to benefit the coalition overall if you do a good job of collecting that and kind of think out your process. Next, I want to talk about promising practices. And remember, just as you have questions, go ahead and put them into the chat feature. We will come back to them, and we'll also give you some time to ask questions at the end. So several years ago, we came up with 10 promising practices around savings. Most programs use these. Most programs aren't using all of them. Some use several in a very limited way. There's a variation. We're going to look at a couple of them with a little more depth, and talk about how you can get some of this going just during the tax season. So communicating to the taxpayer about savings before they come. We know the taxpayer already comes in with a mindset they have the money spent. They know what they're going to do with it. And some of what you need to do is get them to think about savings before they even get to that tax site. So it's part of their thought process. a lot of your emails, a lot of your messaging, marketing's already gone out. But there's some other things that are happening with your tax site, particularly if you're taking appointments. When they call in for that appointment, the message they get when they call in for the appointment, if they're using a online system, they call somewhere to find out about like where the sites are. Those are all places where you can embed this message about tax time savings. It's something you can like, oh, I can redesign that script that whoever's talking to my taxpayers to sign up for appointments, or the outgoing message to taxpayers now, and I can even make adjustments to my message if it doesn't feel like it's working or people are confused. You guys are doing Save Your Refund. I think is the goal of like, you know, at least everyone getting one refund split this year, and getting one person signed up for Save Your Refund at your site. You know, people aren't going to split refunds if they don't show up with the checking account information and savings account information. So getting that out on these early messages, that can be really important to your success. Building commitment. So a lot of times we talked about commitment among staff and volunteers, and like I think a lot of times people think of it as a pledge. We really don't. We think of it as this is a long-term building commitment, making people like recognize this as what we do as a quality service to our taxpayers. You know, and creating also over time this feedback loop between your volunteers and your clients, that savings benefits them. That's something that's part of the service we offer. So there's a couple things that really during the season you can do that helps build that commitment. One is really support your taxpayers in this endeavor. Talking to people about savings is not easy, and we do a lot to support, you know, taxpayers in terms of return preparation. Yeah, I've got clicky fingers today. That we don't necessarily do around the savings program. So, you know, having those team meetings, discussing how, you know, discuss savings during the team meetings. Don't just discuss like quality issues. Have some messages going out to taxpayers about your success stories with savings. Let your preparers know that some of this is working. People are having a really good experience. Make sure they feel supported. Make sure they know who to contact if they've got questions about this. These are all things you can really do to build commitment. A lot of that feeds into this other thing of making sure preparers know how to help taxpayers. Yeah, a lot of this is going to happen in training. If you don't like teach people how to use 8888 in training, you know, it's really something that should happen there. But people forget. People need support. So one of the things I really recommend is like, let's you know, in that team meeting, let's talk about savings. Let's get people's questions. Let's like train them to do this activity of talking about savings at the site. If there's things people are consistently struggling on, it's a good chance to create a worksheet or a tool that they could use to help with that. And a lot of that has to do with communication, and also making sure your site coordinators know who to talk to if they're having a problem. They don't know how to address the question with tax from the tax preparers. Another one, I think, you know, try to really focus on 1, 2, maybe 3 things that we're offering around tax time savings. If you got a great coaching program, you want to offer that in addition to Save Your Refund. I know most of you are gonna like do the Save Your Refund, talk about the refund split. You know, that's a good opportunity to engage in savings. You might want to focus on the tax time bonds. You might not want to, just because you've got other things going on. So think about the few things you're going to offer. And if you've got a lot of things you want to talk about, you want to develop a way to kind of like trim that down so the taxpayers are looking at the ones that are most appropriate to them. So a lot of times that's where you might have a financial coach on site or something like that, who's asking a few questions kind of like and helping point the taxpayer in the right direction for these like saving solutions. Providing incentives, Save Your Refund is a great incentive. But I've also noticed that like things like reusable shopping bags, things you might get for free from your banks, or like different merchant, like kind of like marketing merchandise, really can get some conversations going. People love reusable shopping bags and insulated lunch boxes, little stress balls, and piggy banks. You can get those really free, and having those displayed at your site can really get some conversations going. You could even do like little giveaways, spin a wheel or something to hand out those prizes for taking on a savings activity, or signing up for your coaching, or pulling a credit report, or whatever you're doing at your tax site. Use anchorings. Like anchoring is something people are using and should think about some more. So anchoring, pretty simple way to kind of put an amount in their mind, kind of gets them thinking about what is the right amount to save for them. Is there an emergency, or what is the right amount? What do they need for an emergency? Kind of gets them away from the idea of just it's all or nothing. A lot of you might do like $50 because that's the minimum to enter into the tax time savings contest. You might say 1 month's rent is a way to anchor the message. Can you save a month's rent? Again, these are things you can actually kind of get going at the tax site. After the season's rolling, you might just hit on a message that you're just going to use at the tax site to try to like talk to people about savings and what might be the right amount. We also have a couple new promising practices. I don't know if you guys are going to look at any of these. Some of you may already be doing it. So financial well-being special events, a lot of times people do this around kickoff, the tax season. And the idea is to bring some of your community partners in, or bring some of your experts in to talk about the services you offer and introduce your taxpayers to those. It doesn't necessarily make sense, something you're not able to do every day, but if you do a big event that might have some marketing appeal, might bring some partners in, that's a great service you can do your tax payers, and can earn you some free media, get people to know about your organization, your services. And there's a lot of benefits on this in terms of building up your organization, getting people to know about what you're doing, and make connections with your local partners. We're gonna like kind of go through the examples quickly. So usually the events are big, usually the events are big one-day events like United Way of Suncoast did, where they did the taxathon. It's centralized. It's lots of taxpayers coming in. And this works for a coalition and more rural sites, is they're doing multiple days on a Super Saturday where they bring in some community partners, and they're really rural, so they're bringing their lawyers in for one day at different locations at the bank site. So Super Saturday has a calendar, and they're doing a different Super Saturday at one at a different one of their sites pretty much throughout the tax season. There's some keys. Just really be intentional about why you're doing the event. It shouldn't be just about preparing returns, because that's not that sustainable. It's kind of costly way to get returns done. It's a great way to get your taxpayers connected to other services. It's a great way to get the community to know about your organization and what you're doing. It can be a great way to have extra resources to serve the deaf community or people with disabilities that you don't normally serve. The other promising practices, and there is an organization that I'm talking to right now who we see as an example of this, is developing an advisory group. And I know you guys kind of do this through your site coordinators, and you're talking about leveraging services, kind of sharing information to make the tax process work better for all of you. We're gonna kind of move through the benefits. I hope you're finding kind of the benefits that you're kind of connecting to what we're trying to do around tax time savings better. You're thinking about how these services get delivered locally better. You're thinking about who the local partners are, or who maybe the statewide partners are you haven't reached out to yet, and making connections that may not immediately occur to Martha or Joe, because you work with these people in your local sites all the time. Here's our two examples: Cash Campaign of Maryland and MassCap. So you actually are one of the inspirations for this promising practices, so I want to thank you all for that. And I think, kind of building the community of practice you have with the site coordinators is a really important thing. I'm going to go ahead and just, so we're kind of wrapping up, quick overview of the tools that are there if you haven't used them, seen them. I know we did a session in fall where we used some of these tools. Messaging triangle. These are all things you can pull off the CFPB website. It's about creating unified messages. It can be really helpful to kind of for getting everyone on the same page, and then you can develop a lot of your materials around that. You can also figure out how you want to integrate messages that you might be provided by MassCap or from Commonwealth for the Save Your Refund. You want the message to work for your volunteers and your clients. So this tool can really help you kind of hone that message down. If you're going to use anchoring, or you want to play around with an anchored messaging at your site, we have an anchored messaging tool, which really gets down to asking a few questions to help you say, what would be the anchored message that I want to share with my clients. So much of this marketing and messaging stuff is about knowing your client, knowing your situation. You guys are really experts on that, and that really can make a big difference. So the direction we went is to really just create a tool so you can use your expert knowledge on your clients and your program and all the things you do to create the messages and the marketing that works. Taxpayer Experience Map. This is going to be another great tool. I'm not sure, it doesn't take that long to kind of look at this, but particularly at the tax site, and if you're looking at Save Your Refund, kind of looking through each of the steps and the interactions and where you're going to talk about Save Your Refund and talk about Save Your Refund again. A lot of that can happen in the Taxpayer Experience Map. Or if you're going to try to engage people in coaching, you think about, hey, where is that opportunity to talk about financial coaching, engage people with it, and different steps of the way based on the experience of the taxpayer. And also, it's a really good way to think about improving your services or improving the experience for your taxpayers and your volunteers. And then there's the planning tools. I think most of these you're really gonna like want to be doing preseason or end of season. Although March is a really good time to start planning because everything's fresh. Particularly, you can pull a group together. I started doing that, and I like when I first did a March planning meeting, my staff thought I was crazy, you know, but I got a few of my site coordinators come in. We sat and had that planning meeting. It was really productive, and really got us in the right place for the future, for the next year. And that is the end of my presentation. So I think we're going to go to questions and comments. And I know I was brisk, and I know I'm probably even kind of at the end of my time. But do we have any questions at this time?
Hi, JC. It's Martha.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody has put any questions in so far, so feel free, not just about the material presented today, but on any general VITA questions that you might have, or the shutdown or anything. Feel free to type in your questions.
Well, if it's right and there's only 10 people on the call, do we want to open the phone lines?
Yeah, we can do that. Let's see. I think I can unmute everyone, and then if anybody doesn't want to be unmuted, you'll just have to mute yourself again. So we'll see if that.
Yeah. Well,
I think everybody's probably also manually unmuted.
Okay.
Okay, there is a question. What should we be telling our clients about the timeline for refunds?
They couldn't get that message about the management part of it. It's not about just processing the applications.
It's a different skill set than subject matter expertise.
Exactly.
I'm pre-muting
Right.
everybody because we do have some background noise.
Okay. I think that
Folks do want to speak up as opposed to type in a question. There's a little function where it says you can raise your hand, a little hand symbol. So you can also press that, and then I can unmute you. But if I unmute everybody, then we do get quite a bit of background noise. So.
That's okay.
So we have a question. We do have a question.
Timing of refunds.
Yes.
Okay.
Timing of refunds. It should be the same as it should. Processing should happen the same as last year. However, if anything goes wrong, it'll take longer. That's kind of where the shutdown puts everything. It's like, if there's any question about the return, if it gets caught up in like the efforts to prevent identity theft, you know, that it, you know, it's, you happen to be a false positive for identity theft and you get put into the IRS system for that, those processes are going to take longer. Resolving a reject or any communication with the IRS, getting information from the IRS, getting the IRS to answer your questions, that's going to take longer. So if the return goes through, it should go through just like normal, assuming like e-file doesn't crash or something like that. You know, I think it's like where it gets screwed up is if it gets caught up in anything that like delays it. If it gets caught up in anything that would normally delay it, it delays it a lot longer. Just because like some of that takes people to fix. And the other thing is like, whenever they do tax reform, there's always some kind of problem with forms, either at the state level or with some of the software providers. There's just things they've missed, and this was a lot of reform, and they're just like getting the forms out to the software providers now on some of this. So yeah, there will be things, but there's going to be a lot of taxpayers that don't see any difference. So what do you tell people? I think that's what you tell them. It's like, if there's any problems with your return, I think it can also get people to you know, just in terms of sharing any additional information that might slow down the return, knowing if someone might try to claim your child, those kind of things. That becomes even more important now. You want to make sure you're doing everything you can to get it right the first time. Other questions?
All right, I don't see any other questions. Nothing in the chat or questions box.
Right.
I think that does it.
Okay. You know, if there's more questions, shoot them to Martha, and she will forward them to me, and we'll get back to you. If you're looking at things, we've shared some different documents in terms of promising practices, the research CFPB's report CFPB's written, and the tools we have. If you don't know how to access those or get a hold of them, just contact Martha, and we'll make sure you get them. But like most of it's on the CFPB website, so if you can get over there and you can find it. Thank you all for giving me this opportunity to talk to you. Thank you for really being a model that we're kind of taking some ideas from and sharing them with the country.
Great. So before we finish up, if you just want to get to the last slide, JC.
Oh, is there a last slide?
Great.
All right.
So just a quick closing. Thank you, everybody, so much for joining us today. Those of you who were able to make it. Thank you to JC. Always a ton of great information. It's really helpful. We hope that the webinar has been helpful and informative. We are going to be sending out an evaluation, so keep an eye out for your email with a link to a survey where you can just really quickly let us know your thoughts, and it really helps us to improve the future offerings from the MassCap Training Center. So for all of the MTC's up-to-date training calendar and more, although a heads up that it's been giving me some issues, so I'm hoping to get the webinar, or excuse me, get the calendar updated and ready to rock very soon. But you can also contact me with any questions. I'm the MassCap's Training and Resource Manager at jessbenedetto@masscap.org if you have any questions or if you need to receive any other information on other courses. Thank you so much, and everybody have a great rest of your day.